Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In this video I'm going to show you the Slapchop process I use to paint this kind of miniatures. Here you can see the heroes from the Darkwater box, but this is also the exact same process I use for all the miniatures on my channel, like the vampire I recently posted on my shorts. For this video I will paint Galen Van Denst. I really love this box with these two miniatures. They have a heroic pose and they are perfect to show you my process. To start, I apply a black primer. I personally use an airbrush, but you can absolutely use a black spray can. You will get the same result. Just make sure to cover all the miniatures, so there are no grey area left. Next I apply a zenithal highlight, so I spray paint from the top of the miniature. Again, I use an airbrush, but you can also do this with a white spray can. I also take a bit more time to add extra white on the skin areas, because for Slapchop, those parts need to be brighter. For the dry brush step, I use this kind of brush. I really like long and soft bristle. I get better results with them compared to short bristle. Of course, I use the brightest white paint I have. I dry brush from top to bottom, making sure to hit the entire miniature. This technique helps bring out edges and volumes, and thanks to transparency, it creates smooth gradients very easily. Make sure your brush is clean. If there are small pieces of dried paint left on the brush, the dry brushing won't look good. Worse, those dried bits can actually tear off the primer from the miniature and ruin your Slapchop effect. Avoid that. I use a brush cleaner like this one. It's basically diluted acetone and there are many brands available. I soak the brush well and clean it between uses. And if a brush becomes too loaded with dried paint, don't hesitate to throw it away and use another one. It really makes a big difference on your paint jobs. Alright, the miniature is ready. The Slapchop base is done, so now we move on the base colors. Of course, I use contrast type paints, because that's the whole point of Slapchop. I personally use the Citadel range for my base colors because I prefer them, but however, any other speed paint range can work as well. That said, you need to choose your colors carefully. Not all paints are equal in terms of coverage and quality. For example, for red, I prefer Fleshshade's red over Blood Angel reds, which I found not opaque enough and not intense enough. Same things for black. I prefer Black Legion over Black Templar, which I find a bit too flat. What I want is a nice and strong color in a single coat. The goal here is also to save time. Some paints are also great for things other than they are originally meant for. For example, I really like using Fyreslayer flesh or Gilliman flesh to paint wood. Nazdrag yellow works very well for non-metallic gold, and also Snakebat laser make a very convincing blonde hair. So experiment and have fun! Now that all the non-metallic colors are done, let's talk about metallics. For metals, I use the Army Painter Speedpaint metallic range. They work like contrast paint from Citadel, but with metallic pigment. For steel, I mainly use Broadsword silver and Enchanted steel. And for gold, I use Golden Armor and Aztec gold. I have a real preference for Aztec Gold. Its slightly greenish tone gives a result like this. These are the 4 pens I use the most. I sometimes use these 3 as well. They are a bit shinier. However, I'm not a big fan of the bronze tones. They tend to separate in the pot and have much weaker coverage. Here are a few examples of results. Here on the Enchanted Steel on the armor. Here, golden armor on the Night Gold areas. And here, another example using Aztec Gold. Always remember to check your pots really well. These formulas are tricky and the paint separates very quickly. Also, never use a wet palette for these paints. Water makes them separate even faster, and after a few minutes you end up with a paint that has no coverage at all. As you can see here, the paint is completely separated. So I use a classic dry palette. Be careful to remove any dried paint skins because I noticed they make the paint dry even faster. You'll need to paint fairly quickly because these paints dry fast on the palette. It's not perfect, but it's the best solution I've found so far. So for Galen, I will use Enchanted Steel for all the steel part, Broadsword Silver for the blade, and Aztec Gold for the gold area. I had the choice between Aztec Gold and Golden Armor, but I just love Aztec Gold too much. One more thing, watch out for air bubbles like this. They speed up drying and can quickly ruin your brush. So now let's apply the metallics on Galen. And most importantly, clean your brush regularly because the paint dries fast and can damage the tip. For very small areas without much texture, I use classic Citadel metallic paints, like iron wires or retributor gold. The thick, viscous texture of army painter metallics doesn't work well for this kind of detail. Alright, the base coats on Galen are done, so now it's wash time. Here are the main washes I use. The 3 I use the most are Reikland Fleshshade, Agarros Shade, and an oil. Reikland is mainly for skin, but I also sometimes use Cygor shade to give a dead purplish look. On the needs, I may also use Seraphim Sepia for warmer tone or rattling grime, but be careful with that one. You need to dilute it with a contrast medium, otherwise it's way too strong. I also have some colored washes, but I usually try to use the same wash on most of the miniature. For example, on this one, I use Reikland Fleshshade on all the skin and the fur, and Agarros Shade on the clothes and metals. On the knight, I like using Reikland Fleshshade on both gold and steel. It gives a nice warm tone to the metals. And for the fabric, I use Nuln oil. And for the Gyran wizard, I use Coelia Green Shade on the entire miniature to push that green atmosphere. For Galen, I will use Reikland Fleshshade on the skin, only on the head, and for the rest of the miniature, I apply a generous coat of Nuln oil all over. So first the head, and then Nuln oil on the entire miniature. I don't hesitate to use a lot. The goal is to really bring out the shadows and add volume. I really like the slightly grimdark look that washes give, so yeah, I go pretty heavy on the fig. Once the miniature is dry, we move on to layering, but honestly, you can stop here if you're happy with the result. Here are the colors I will use. This one for red, this one for skin, this one for leather, this one for boots and gloves, this one for pink area, and finally a bit of Ushabti bone and Corax white for small details like a bandage, hairs and eyes. As I said, this step is optional for me, but it really improves the final quality as long as you choose the right tones, of course. It's not always easy to paint over the Slapchop texture, so my advice is to take your time and thin your pen well. For metallic highlights, after a lot of testing, I came to a simple conclusion. Stormhost silver works everywhere. A very thin layer on all metals creates a nice light reflection. It works on every metal tone and contrasts nicely with the overall grimdark look. No more overthinking, Stormhost silver everywhere. And here is the final result. A solid Slapchop paint job done in less than 2 hours. You can paint entire army like this by patch painting and they will look great. Well, I still have to do the bases, but as you might have noticed in my shorts, I don't really like this part. I actually do them later in batches, so sorry if the bases are missing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel.